Everybody, so we just more dressed up in this. Passion practice. Right.
You're the boss, too.
No, I'm not the boss. I've got some ladies over there that work in my office that tell you otherwise.
You got KTK here. Who's that?
He's channel 7 there.
CBS.
CBS not TV.
And Dallas stations, I saw.
We waited longer from the Dallas station to be here.
Yeah.
I guess I'd be one for it. Yeah, really, really.
Yeah, they, bring me is.
Yeah. Yeah. Where's hanging in there though?
How many days a week do you publish?
Pardon?
How many days a week are you publishing?
All of our papers are weeklies. We have 3 in Vincent County. Carroll. And Maybank.
Who's your parent company?
John, an individual named John Zandt.
And I'm assuming y'all are all digital now too as well.
Oh, yeah. But I'm an old timer, they don't let me do anything like that.
Yeah, when I worked at the Palisade Herald, it was like, well, half of our stuff was digital, the rest of it print, they all across the other. CNHI, they don't have a lot of papers.
Yeah.
We were still doing 3 days a week in Palestine.
Feel like I'm working daily because all of our publishing days are different.
Yeah.
And Harold is the Thursday, is the most of Friday, so basically you stay with Sunday.
Yeah, still enough to keep you busy.
Harold is dating Saturday each week. Maybank actually does theirs twice a week, they do it Thursday.
Do you contribute to all of them or just here?
Pardon?
Do you contribute to all of them?
Primarily the ones that maintain County.
Gotcha.
Every once in a while, an event will occur that will affect Carroll and or Maybank. So
Yeah.
I'll cover it with them. We had a recent public, the TCQ. And public meeting can't. You are to be surprised if it actually. And having closer to the city like that.
Yeah.
So I did a story, for our papers.
Or maybe it's both.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's
That's great. Great.
Last one.
Well, if we can have a large house. Straight away, what I talked about.
You ever watch Signal Green?
Yes, I have. It's like watching. I think the best of all, not grass.
Well, when you go to West Texas, I go to some. And it's pretty fun to watch. This one, that's this.
Everybody's involved for receiver, you know, yeah, it's the same.
So I know where it's starting. They're all, I think they're all. It's like, already, I see. She paid something, the man could understand. Minimum boards, 60.
Yeah.
Y'all can blame Cat 5, we're waiting on that.
But. So, look, then it goes back. I get back off. That's what we're absolutely. But she had all pain, some in some ways. I'm not so. The gym is in the blue flag.
So glad it's not really. Please tell us.
Right.
All right, y'all, you've been waiting long enough. We're gonna go ahead and start. There's one more coming, but we still about 12 minutes out, so. Okay, yesterday was my first day back at work after, no, this is not for TV. Yesterday was my first day back at work after a week of bad COVID. So if I start having a coughing fit, you'll shut off those cameras and we'll restart, okay? State Representative Dutton's gonna get us going today.
Hey, thanks y'all for coming out this afternoon and visiting with us about what happened yesterday here in Van Zandt County. First and foremost, I want to say that Sergeant Hughes did a great job following his instincts with the stop that he made. And then this is a great example of the communication of 3 to 4 different agencies communicating. From Wills Point PD to the district attorney's office to Homeland Security. It's obviously an ongoing investigation, and I think they are continually getting more information as we speak right now. But a lot of credit goes toward Sergeant Hughes, District Attorney Tonda Curry, and Homeland Security. But furthermore, most importantly, I think this really highlights and is a great example of the failure of the Biden-Harris administration's policies at our southern border. If you don't think that the chaos down at the border is not affecting rural East Texas, yesterday's stop and yesterday's arrest is a prime example of that. And so I want to introduce to you District Attorney Tonda Curry. She's going to give you all the information. I believe that she is going to provide you with an affidavit of what happened. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tonda Curry and we will answer questions later.
Thank you, Representative. Good morning, everyone. And again, thank you for being here. I want to start by telling a story. In September of last year, a man named Wen Quang Lin left China. He left China and headed to Hong Kong. From Hong Kong, he flew to the country of Turkey. From Turkey, he boarded an aircraft and flew to Mexico. Once he arrived in Mexico, he on foot traveled to the border at Tecate, California, where he attempted to cross illegally with a whole group of people from China. He and his compadres were intercepted by Customs and Border Patrol, law enforcement there. And even though they were attempting to enter this country illegally, they were allowed in under current immigration policies of our country. And this story continues, ladies and gentlemen, up until yesterday, when he was found right here with another Chinese national named Weizhan Chen, who also attempted to immigrate into this country illegally, also was contacted by Customs and Border Patrol, and even though he was attempting to enter illegally, was allowed to enter by our current administration's policies. He entered in December of this year. These two men yesterday were stopped in Van Zandt County by, as Representative Dutton mentioned, Charlie Hughes, a sergeant with the Wills Point Police Department. And let me take just a second and commend Sergeant Hughes. Sergeant Hughes is an outstanding officer. He is dedicated to interdiction on our highways and interstates. He does a fantastic job. He is a canine handling officer, has a highly trained, highly qualified dog that he works with, and is responsible for many, many seizures of drugs, currency, other valuables that take place here in Van Zandt County. We're going to talk more about those in just a minute. And none of this, we wouldn't be here today, but for the dedication of Sergeant Hughes. Sergeant Hughes called me while he's on the side of the road yesterday because it was a very novel situation that he was presented with. Together, we researched, we looked at different options, considered different options, and made law enforcement decisions to take these men into custody and to seize what they had. After Sergeant Hughes stopped this vehicle for a traffic violation, he encountered these two Chinese men who apparently did not speak English. He used translation services that law enforcement has available to them, and was very suspicious of their activities. So acting on his suspicion, he ran his dog on this vehicle. You can see this is the dog that Sergeant Hughes uses. Her name is Anya, Hania. She is, as I said, a very decorated law enforcement tool here. She has handled many, many successful seizures and forfeitures. Anya immediately alerted, strong alert on the vehicle. With that gave Sergeant Hughes probable cause to search the vehicle. And when he searched the vehicle, he found 100, a little slightly more than 100 ounces of gold bullion bars. Two men who have been in this country less than a year, who were encountered by Customs and Border Patrol, who were taken into custody, released, did not have gold bullion in their possession. And now, one of them 8 months later, one of them 11 months later, is in possession of approximately $250,000 worth of gold. After Sergeant Hughes arrested the men, took them into custody, documented everything with regard to the gold, he began backtracking, working backwards, investigating like a good law enforcement officer does. And he learned, with the assistance of Homeland Security, when these two gentlemen, Mr. Lin and Mr. Chen, came into the country. He learned that they came in illegally. He learned that they were allowed in under current policies. And he also used some other law enforcement tools to trace their steps, what had happened. And he learned that on the 31st, they left Los Angeles on an airplane, poor immigrants who have nothing, left Los Angeles on an airplane, flew to Atlanta, according to them, for play, for vacation. When they arrived in Atlanta, they were stopped shortly after they rented a car by another law enforcement officer. After they were stopped, they thought, law enforcement knows about this vehicle. They went back to the rental company, turned that vehicle in, rented a different vehicle, one that was unknown to law enforcement. They left the rental agency at that point. They traveled to Marietta, Georgia, an area that, according to the local law enforcement there, is an area that is known to be controlled by the cartel, by people who prey on U.S. citizens selling drugs. They were there for a very short period of time. They left that area in Marietta, drove south to Jacksonville, Florida. We're in Jacksonville, Florida, approximately 2 hours, maybe a little less. Left Jacksonville, Florida on Interstate 10, drove to 49, headed north to Interstate 20 and west, presumably back to LA, where the car was due to be turned in on the 3rd. Those are the type of people that are coming in at our southern border. I'm sure there are good people. I'm sure there are good people who are leaving horrible circumstances. But amongst those good are these type who come here and help organizations that prey on US citizens. But I want to also talk today about one of the law enforcement tools that we have as district attorneys, prosecutors, interdiction officers, narcotics investigators, and other financial crime investigators. One of those tools that we have is called civil asset forfeiture. Civil asset forfeiture allows us to do what happened yesterday. It's all laid out in Chapter 59 of the Code of Criminal Procedure in Texas. And it allows us to make these traffic stops. And when we know that there is a crime being committed and that these people are profiting off of that crime, profiting off of taking advantage of US citizens, US residents, it allows us to hurt them by taking those profits from them. And that's what happened yesterday. Sergeant Hughes was able to seize that $250,000 in gold bullion. It is now safely locked in a safety deposit box under the control of the district attorney's office, and civil forfeiture proceedings have been filed in the district court here in Van Zandt County to permanently take that from the criminals who are preying off of our fellow Americans. Civil asset forfeiture is something that has been under attack by the Texas legislature, by the US Congress for the past several years as something that is bad. I'm here to tell you, it is not something that is bad. Maybe, yes, I've heard the stories. There are people who abuse it. Fine, vote them out of office. But do not take this law enforcement tool away from communities like ours who use it correctly, use it to further law enforcement, use it to further protect our citizens, our residents, our fellow Americans. We were able to take that gold from them yesterday, $250,000 out of their possession. We have filed the court proceedings. There will be a hearing in court, possibly a trial in court, to determine whether or not that in fact was the proceeds of illegal activity. And if the state of Texas, my office, is able to prove by preponderance of the evidence that it is, then that money, that value, is transferred to the Wills Point Police Department, the Van Zandt County District Attorney's Office, the officer in Georgia who helped us, who fed us information. That money is put back into our budgets for law enforcement purposes, meaning that the taxpayers of the county don't have to reach into their pockets in order to fund that portion of law enforcement. Let me tell you, go back to Sergeant Hughes. The truck that he uses in interdiction has to be specially equipped. We have to have license plate readers. The dog, Anya, $15,000, plus the maintenance, the training, the recertifications, all of that. Altogether, the tools that Sergeant Hughes uses, and he's not our only interdiction officer in the county. We have others. Canton PD has one. We have others. But in this case, it was Sergeant Hughes. The tools that he alone uses, $170,000 approximately. The truck itself, to be equipped for the dog and the special needs, the air conditioning for the dog, the cage for the dog, all of that. The truck itself is over $100,000. That's money the taxpayers, if civil forfeiture is taken away from us, that's money the taxpayers will have to come up with out of their pockets, you and I. But the tool of civil forfeiture allows us to take it from the criminals and put it in our budget and use that money to turn around and buy more tools, get more training, hire more officers, have a second interdiction officer, outfit a second truck to keep poison, to keep fraud from being perpetrated on our fellow Americans. So I'm here today, yes, to talk about the poor, the ineffective immigration policies that are currently in play in this country. But I'm here also to talk about the value of civil asset forfeiture and the tools that it brings to law enforcement, the ability that it gives us, first of all, to hurt the organization, but second of all, to fortify ourselves for future investigations without that burden being placed on the taxpayers. So this story, Mr. Lin and Mr. Chen, their story started with them leaving China and coming here to prey on Americans. It ends right now with us taking $250,000 worth of gold from their organization. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I just want to point out real quick
Yes,
that
ma'am.
if they are released or out on bond and you had to, along the line, return the
Yes.
$250,000, that would go back into their organization to again
Exactly.
continue to hurt.
Right,
US citizens.
without civil asset forfeiture, we could not have taken that from them. We would have had to hand it back, release them, send them on down the road with that money to give back to their organization.
To further harm US
To
citizens.
further harm.
And what
to-
I would like to point out is that the Texas legislature has introduced legislation to strip this tool from law enforcement, and it's probably going to come up again in the next legislative session. And like DA Curry pointed out, there may be some situations where law enforcement or DAs are taking advantage of this tool. But as a legislature, we need to be very, very careful about the laws that we pass and the changes that we make that affect law enforcement and their effectiveness to protect us and to protect our country.
That's right.
I think Nolan had a question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
We, really being held, I guess, in the Van County Jail, and would they originate a mugshot or anything along those lines?
Yes, we can get y'all, the jail can get y'all mugshots, I'm sure. Yes, sir.
We just have to reach out to them directly.
Yes. I'll try to work on that before you leave today, but yes, we can get you some or they can get you some. Yes.
Can you tell us why the vehicle stopped initially?
The vehicle was stopped when it saw Sergeant Hughes sitting on the side of the road. It made a deliberate evasive maneuver, changed lanes in a dangerous fashion, and caused another car to have to suddenly brake. So that was the probable cause for the traffic violation.
You mentioned that these, what, maybe both entered, or do you know if they entered as asylum seekers as well?
I don't know that yet. I know that they showed up, that they tried to get across illegally. That's what I know and that comes from Homeland Security.
And these two individuals, you think they were used by, like you mentioned, the cartel or the organizations in China to carry out this gold?
Yes, and that's why it's important that we have the tool of civil asset forfeiture. There's another tool called criminal asset forfeiture. In criminal asset forfeiture, if I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt the crime, then I have the ability to go ahead with forfeiture. At this point today, there's no way I can prove that because I don't know what exactly what crime they were involved in. Now, I have my suspicions, sure, because I know that they went to an area in Marietta that was controlled by the drug cartels. So do I suspect it's drugs? Absolutely. But I also know that there are many other particularly fraud type scams that are going on, preying on vulnerable, particularly elderly victims that involve gold and where the proceeds are turned into gold because it is such a ready commodity. Yes, sir.
Do you think when they were stopped, do you think they were leaving Van Zandt County and going somewhere else in
Yes,
Texas, or were they could stay here?
No, we believe they were on their way to LA because the car was due back in LA. One of them possessed a Los Angeles driver's license. The other possessed a Hawaii driver's license.
I just want to follow up. I read there was probably some reports that apparently Chinese nationalists coming to the United States is continuing to go up. What do you have to say about that? I mean, have you seen that as a DA here in East Texas, catching Chinese nationals that are here illegally? As part of the ongoing border problem that.
Yes, this is not the first incident that we have encountered Chinese nationals on the highway engaged in illegal activities. We had another large seizure about 11 months ago where we took $500,000 from 2 Chinese nationals.
You think they pose the same type of threat as maybe some other people that are coming over here illegally in other countries?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. When you come here and you're engaging in criminal activity in less than a year, you'll never convince me that you came with good intent.
Will the U.S. attorneys take over this case?
At this point, there's no indication that they will.
Then what all charges are expected to be filed against this student?
Currently, they're facing charges of money laundering, which is transporting the proceeds of illegal activity.
I know you mentioned this wasn't the first time this has happened in the county. How often does traffic stops like these occur with either drugs, gold, money that was found?
You know, it's one of those things that seems to come and go in waves. I'll say that since I've been DA, this is our first gold seizure. I don't know of any before I was DA. The money seizures, you just never know when one's going to happen, and they might be $10,000 or $15,000. They might be $500,000. But it's all about good police work and dedication.
I think another important thing to point out is that they had a driver's license from California, one from Hawaii, that they obtained legally. Here in Texas, you have to be a US citizen to obtain a Texas driver's license. So these guys are operating out of the states that they know that they can, exploit the liberal policies of those states where they can obtain these driver's license and move about without being a US citizen.
And I think one thing that helped that representative is the fact that they were allowed in by the administration. If they hadn't been encountered and had been successful in trying to sneak in, perhaps they couldn't have got those, or at least not gotten legitimate ones. But once they were allowed in, then they can get them.
Could you explain a little bit why, obviously we know drug transfer is legal, why this type of gold or this type of, currency is illegal to transfer?
It's only illegal to transport it if it's the proceeds of unlawful activity. You have 2 men, don't work. Both, when Sergeant Hughes found the bag containing the gold, both of them said, "I don't know what that is. It's not mine." Now later, one of them admitted that someone had given it to him to take with him. Yeah, no legitimate explanation. Men who say they flew from LA to Atlanta to play around, to have a good time, and they're there less than a day.
They don't know how they got gold bullion.
And don't know how they got gold bullion in their car. Yeah, to the second rent car. Yeah.
I just want to be specific, just my final question here for you. Thanks for doing this. So you definitely think this is definitely related to drugs or a cartel somewhere? Or I'm sure we don't know exactly yet, but you think there's a good possibility this is related to those two?
That's the strongest possibility at this time. We do know, we have information through Homeland Security and other federal agencies that there are people here who have come here illegally, who are engaging in other type of fraud on the elderly particularly, is what was pointed out to us. And those organizations are frequently transferring their proceeds into gold bars as well. That is a possibility. The fact that they went to the drug area, in my mind, makes drugs a stronger possibility.
So the dog alerted on the vehicle during the traffic stop, during the search.
Yes, sir.
So they're trained to alert on drugs.
Yes, sir.
There were no drugs found.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
Did Sergeant Hughes say what the dog alerted to then?
Did Sergeant Hughes say what?
Like, so he said that the dog didn't alert to drugs or anything, did he say specifically what the dog alerted to?
No, it alerted to the odor of drugs. The odor of drugs, it's a very scientific field, but if drugs have been on a person, about a person, in a person's bag, in the bag that the gold was in, perhaps, that odor lingers molecularly. And the dog will alert on an odor even for some period of time, even after the presence of the drugs is gone.
So just because it wasn't there doesn't mean that it hadn't been there.
Right. And remember, they left the drug area in Marietta, went to Jacksonville, were there for a couple hours, and then came this direction.
Is there a reason to believe that they might have been trafficking drugs from, like, they dropped drugs off probably in?
It's something we will look at.
For these two, what's next in the investigation?
What's next in the investigation? Continue learning everything we can about these two men and their travels since they arrived in this country last year.
And then, I don't know, can you guys officially charge them now, or do you guys need more evidence to charge them and continue with this investigation?
They were arrested for money laundering. No formal charges have been filed yet.
What kind of evidence do you need?
To convict them in court of money laundering, I will have to prove the unlawful activity that they were engaged in. At this point, for an arrest, of course, probable cause. And we do have probable cause of money laundering.
So is the dog alerting on drugs and not finding any enough to continue evidence?
It's enough to allow us to search the car.
Okay, but beyond that, we didn't find any drugs.
Correct.
So without being able to put drugs in their possession, where does that leave you being able to formally charge them?
And that's why the tool of civil asset forfeiture is so important. True, at this point today, as is the case in many, many criminal investigations, the day an officer makes the arrest, he may or may not know if he will ever get to the burden of beyond a reasonable doubt. That's why it's probable cause for arrest. In this case, if we have probable cause. If we don't get to beyond a reasonable doubt and we don't have civil forfeiture, we're calling these guys and giving them this gold back. So that's the importance of the tool of civil asset forfeiture.
Follow-up question, you had mentioned this is the first time you've heard of a gold laundering since you've been DA here in the county. Two-part question, how long have you been the DA in Zandt County, and what was your reaction when you heard about this?
I've been the DA. I took office January 1st of 2019, and I wasn't surprised that it was Charlie who made a stop like this. I know him. I know how good and thorough he is. I wasn't surprised that he called me to help him through it. When he told me the story, he said, kind of a tough one, isn't it? But we thought about it, figured it out, did some research. Unusual, yes, but I've been in this business 30-something years. Nothing surprises me anymore. All right. Thanks y'all very much.
Thank you so much for coming out and being interested in what's going on in Van Zandt County. Kudos to DA Tonda Curry. Kudos to Sergeant Hughes and Homeland Security, all three agencies working together again, along with the agencies in the other states. So thank y'all so much.
One quick last question is, are there any other risks that are expected to be made for this?
At this point, it's unknown.
All right, thanks y'all.
Thank you. Oh, and if you didn't get them, we've got copies of these pictures for you and a copy of the affidavit that was filed today.
Can you possibly, like you said, possibly know like who I was talking to about John, we have to contact the
Let me see if I can get.
Okay, thanks so much. We'll be around, we're not gonna.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate that. Oh. Good to see you all. Good to see you. Nice to meet you.
So good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
We catch up.
You bet.
Proud. Thanks, sir. Take care. And so what is there? Oh, yeah, it's still there. Yeah, if he's still there, you know, if he's still there. Okay, I'll let her know.
Let's see.
I'll see you. She cracks me up every morning. I love her. She's great. I'll let her know. She's very, very sweet.
Good to meet you.
Likewise.
Have a good day.
You too. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.